everybody, and welcome to the webinar that's relating to these particular qualifications. It's the Advanced Diploma in Strategic People Management and the Advanced Diploma in Strategic Learning and Development. So the subject then that I'll be looking at is the unit 7C004, and that's the Business Research in People Practice. And it's a accompanying assignment that is going to be used to assess this particular unit. So what I plan to cover then is I want to start really by explaining the purpose of the unit. Then we'll move on and look at how the unit's going to be assessed, and we'll have a look at the assessment itself. In terms of what it is you're going to need to do to complete the unit and the assessment. We'll also look at what some of the key features are then of an effective business research report, just to give you some additional guidance in terms of what you're going to need to be doing. So the focus of this unit then is all about evidence-based practice, which the CIPD continue to promote because it's so important that we're applying this as people professionals, because we're constantly making decisions, we're looking to solve problems, many of which can be complex. And when you're looking to give gravitas to those solutions, to those decisions, it's important then that they're not based on what might be outdated viewpoints or outdated practices, not based on personal opinions because they could be biased. But what we must ensure then that our decisions and our solutions are based on what are reliable facts, and the consideration is being given to the business context in which you want to influence those business leaders and also create a more positive impact. So this concept of evidence-based practice is increasingly more important, and this is what we need to be applying when we're looking at this unit. And by completing this unit then, these are what you look to develop would be your ability to design and conduct integrated research. And I'll be looking a little bit more in terms of what we mean by that. We'll be looking at how to write a business-focused research report, and also your abilities to engage with reflective practice. And each of those we're going to be looking at as we work through the webinar. So how this unit is assessed then is by you need to write a 4,000-word research report in which you're going to be demonstrating competence in all of the 12 assessment criteria. Now, to achieve that, we need to start, or you will need to start, by identifying a people-focused issue which has got strategic relevance to a specific organisation. So you will need to base it within either the organisation you're working with or one that you're familiar with and you can have access to. So that's the first thing you need to do. Moving on, we need to look at what research has gone before us. What body of research is there that's been written by experts in their field that we can draw upon and synthesize to develop a literature review. Following on from that, you need to design and conduct your own original research and what we refer to as integrated research. So it needs to be aligned to the business issue. It needs to be aligned to the research aim, which we'll have a look at in a second. And the reason we're looking at you conducting your own research is that you can actually look also analysing and presenting those research findings, and you can contribute to the body of published research that's gone before you. From that, your findings, you should then be able to develop a set of recommendations which are then evidence-based, and they are to change something within your organisation or the research organisation, and to address the business issue based upon the research included within your research report. And finally, then you will need to reflect upon the research journey to help you identify kind of what you consider that you did well, but also identify areas for future personal development that you'd be able to build into your CPD. So having said this is what the things you need to do, it all culminates in you producing a research report, and that is the assessment. As I said, it's a 4,000-word report, and your tutors will obviously provide you with the input and all the guidance you need to be able to approach the assignment. However, when you actually come to structure what is this business report, the following headings are advisable so that you will need to consider including these as sections within your report. So just run through those quickly and then I'll move on and we can have a look at a little bit more in terms of kind of what you will be looking to include in each of these sections. So we've got an introduction to your report in terms of reference, and that helps to set the parameters of your study. The literature review is where you're reviewing the existing published literature that's relevant to your research study and the research aim. From that, you will develop a set of research questions which will actually help then create focus to your own research. You will need to write a methodology focusing on your own primary research. And then, having collected your data, you need to find an appropriate way to present and analyse that data. You'll have a discussion section which compares and contrasts your raw data from your own primary research with that of the published literature. Your conclusion then will be a summary of the findings of the research study. You then, from that, draw a set of recommendations to address the business issue, supported by an action plan and a cost-benefit analysis. And then finally, then you will need to conduct and engage with some personal reflections upon your research journey. So as I said, what I'm going to be doing to give you a little bit more guidance is we look at each section in turn, which will hopefully give you some direction in terms of what you need to be thinking of to complement everything that you will then get from your own tutors. So then let's start by looking at the first section, which will be your introduction. So I'm just, as I said, going to give you a bit of an overview really in terms of what you could consider included in the introduction. So the introduction then should really provide some little bit of background to the research organisation, because that sets the scene or helps to set the scene. Just briefly mention your role within the organisation, and it might be that you don't work for the organisation, you're external to it, so it's useful to mention that within the introduction. And then include a brief explanation of the business problem that is being addressed, remembering that it does need to be people focused and have strategic relevance to the organisation. Now, there's many different people issues that you might choose to base your research upon. Some examples might be, or some key examples might be staff retention, or if there's a particular area of the business that is suffering from significant high turnover, you might look at how to develop some effective retention strategies to reduce staff turnover. You might be looking at developing an internal talent pipeline, for example, because attraction of talent is difficult. You might look at how to develop a more compelling reward strategy within the organisation, so it's more attractive to future recruits. Now, as I said, it's endless really in terms of what you might consider. So those are just some examples as to what the business problem might be. As a reference, purpose of that is to set the scope or the parameters of the research study. So it will start by you writing the research aim. And the research aim needs to be as clear and focused as you possibly can, because that really will set the direction of your study. It does take some time, I'd say, to actually come up with a very focused research aim. But it's important that you do that, because it's so easy as you're kind of moving through your research to go off at a bit of a tangent. It's easy to go down different rabbit holes. So I would say that the more focused your research aim can be in the first instance, it will help you further on into your research study. So also then, within the terms of reference, think about and just mention within there where the research is going to take place. And the reason I say that is because it might not be the entire organisation. It might be a particular department or particular section of the organisation. So it's important that you include that in the terms of reference, so it's clear as to where the research will take place, and also what the timeframes are. And it's advisable in terms of planning your research study that you also include a Gantt chart, and that can be included in an appendix to actually support the terms of reference. So the next section, so the next thing, having written your introduction, having written the terms of reference, we should then be looking at what has already been written about your research subject. So the purpose then of the literature review is to review and get an insight into what other authors and other academics, other researchers have actually written about your subject area. Now, what you will find when you start doing a literature review, you literally can go off in lots of different directions, because there's so much a wealth of published research out there. It's therefore important that when you write in your literature review, it really does need to be aligned to the research aim, because it's that literature that's going to inform your own research study, but also the recommendations that you complete at the end of the study itself. So you'll be looking at appropriate published research, so it's written by experts in their fields, so it's engaging with that, critically analysing that, and making sure then that you are actually developing and paraphrasing original arguments based upon what you've learned from the published literature, and making sure that it's relevant to and it's going to be useful to your study. Thinking about, is this going to inform my recommendations? So making sure that it's quite tight in terms of what you include, but this is where you're really going to demonstrate your ability to engage with published research and critically analyse it. And then, having completed your literature review, you then need to develop some research questions. Now, these research questions are not the specific questions you can ask as part of your own research. They're not going to be the questions of the survey or maybe some interviews that you conduct. These research questions, or can be referred to as objectives, are kind of the more holistic view of what needs to be investigated. So based on what you've identified from the published literature, from that, what now going forward do you need to investigate when you do your own primary research? And again, your tutors will give you the guidance you need when writing these, but these will definitely give you a sense of focus and direction that you can to do and conduct your own research. Moving on then, the next section, talking about your research, is the methodology section. The purpose of this then is for you to explain and justify the research strategy and the research design that you're going to be adopting for your own primary research. Now, it's important that when you're conducting your research, that it is conducted by you, personally by you, and that it needs to be original research. So it needs to be research that you're conducting for the purpose of this particular assignment and this particular study. So some of you will collect qualitative data, some of you will collect quantitative data, some of you will collect both. So you'll have a mixture of both. Now, you will hopefully be given guidance by your tutors as to the most appropriate research methods to use to address your own research aim and questions. So your tutors will also guide you in terms of how you write your methodology. However, in principle, this is the kind of things you're going to be needing to look to include. So how are you going to plan and conduct your research? Why are these methods appropriate to collect a data set really that will enable you to have some robust analysis and justify those as to why they're appropriate? Thinking about the research population, so who could be included in the research, and then explaining the sample and how that sample is selected from that research population. Think about what limitations there might be associated with this research design. It might be the validity of the data collection method. It might be to do with the reliability of your findings, for example. But give some consideration for that and how you're actually going to address any potential limitations that there could be. And also you'll need to think about how your research will be ethical. So what are the key principles about conducting ethical research and how you're going to adhere to those. Having then conducted your own research, you then need to think about how to best analyse and present that data. Now, that will vary depending on whether you're collecting qualitative or quantitative, but you do need to find the most appropriate way to present that data. And then moving on from the presentation analysis of your own data, you'll then need to include a discussion section. And this is really important because this is where you're comparing and contrasting your own findings from your own primary research with those of the published literature. So looking at what has been said in the literature review about addressing this research aim and about this particular subject, and how your findings compare and contrast, but also thinking about the strategic significance to the research organisation. So thinking, well, what does this mean in terms of what are the implications of the research to the research organisation? The next section then will be the conclusion. The conclusion should be a summary of the research findings. So that will include a holistic summary of the secondary and the primary findings. And it's from this study that you will then be forming your recommendations. Remembering then that these recommendations need to be aligned to the research aim and therefore logically address the business issue. It's very important that when you're making recommendations that you ensure they're evidence-based, so that they are derived and drawn from the research findings. The recommendations also need to be supported by an action plan. So that's an operational document that is going to support the implementation of your recommendations. And also you need to produce a strategic cost benefit analysis. And both of those can be included within the appendix. So they're not included in the word count. But it's important to show you appreciate that both are needed and the difference between the both. So between the two. So the strategic cost benefit analysis has a different audience to the action plan, and it's there to help persuade any decision makers of your recommendations. So you do need to think about being persuasive within the cost-benefit analysis. And then the final bit of this assignment then is where you need to write your personal reflections. And when doing this, you need to reflect on the entire research journey. So it's not just your collection of your primary data, it's very much from the start, when you selected your subject, when you wrote the terms of reference, completion of the literature review, and so on. Okay, so throughout the research journey, you need to consider things like what you felt went well and not so well, what were the strengths, what were the weaknesses of that journey. What did you learn about the subject area? What did you learn about you as a researcher? And really get engaged with some reflective practice to tease out what you think you've learned. And then as a result of that learning, what do you believe you would do differently next time if you're going to complete another study of a similar nature? And then think about, well, what personal development objectives would you set yourself based upon this experience? How do I move forward? What particular areas perhaps do you think you need to develop in? And you can include those then within your CPD. So I just thought it would be useful to just take a look at the marking criteria. So having gone through the requirements of the assignment, I think it's always useful for you to keep referring, as you're completing the assignment, that you keep referring to the marking criteria and thinking about how your report is going to be assessed. So the generic grade descriptors are specific for this unit. And if you look on the left-hand column, you can see that they are actually mirroring the learning outcomes. So it's about the terms of reference and the literature review and the research questions, and then it goes talking about your research methods and the extent you're addressing ethical issues. It's looking at the quality of your data collection and analysis, how you present and interpreting that, and your ability to explain the findings, and that would be the discussion section. And then the last one is to which the extent to which conclusions, recommendations, and the action plan are business focused and credible, and the quality of your reflective analysis. So you can, I think it's quite useful that while you're completing your research and you're completing the research report, that you actually refer to this, because gives you a bit more guidance in terms of what you need to do to create an effective report. And then in terms of thinking about your report and you completing the assessment, I just thought I'd go through some final points then to just help really in terms of making sure that your research is based upon some quality, robust research, and that what you produce then is a report that's effective and evidence-based. So some important things to remember then, make sure that you clearly identify that you've got a people issue to be addressed within the organisation. Make sure then that when you write the research aim, it's clear and very focused, because that really will help you to steer you through the review of the literature, and then when you come to complete your own research. It's important to really show engagement with academic literature. Make sure that those sources are appropriate sources and they are written by experts in their field. Make sure you're referencing appropriately, correctly and appropriately. Make sure then that your findings and your discussion is clear and compelling. It needs to really show that you've considered what the findings are and the implications of those findings for the research organisation. Make sure your recommendations are evidence-based and not just kind of popped in from somewhere random. Make sure they are derived from the findings of both the literature and your own research. Make sure that those recommendations are persuasive. Support them with an action plan and a strategic cost benefit analysis. And then also think about the presentation of your work. You know, this is a professional qualification. You need to think about how can I present it in a professional manner. And finally, then think about the word count. Refer to the CIPD word count policy, but if you check with the assessment brief, because it's clearly laid out in there what is included in the word count and what isn't. Okay. I mentioned already that the action plan and the cost benefit analysis, well, that can go in the appendix, it's not included in the word count, and also the reflective practice that you do and your own reflections upon your research journey, that is not included either within the word limit. But double check so you're absolutely clear what's included and what isn't as you're working through the assessment. So that's the end of this webinar. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen. And I hope you found that it's useful as you work through the unit and the assessment. And on top of that, I really hope you enjoy completing this research and that you find that you get a lot out of it, and also it becomes beneficial for your organisations as well. So again, thank you very much, and I wish you well. Bye-bye.